This is Dr. Caroline Stites, founder and CEO of Vibrogenics, and I'm super excited again to be joined by our medical contributor, Dr. Darryl Bates, MD. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the landscape of medicine, just kind of from the 30,000 foot view from my experience. My family went through medical school in the 50s, right? Very different than the kind of doctor you are today. So very traditional, lockstep thinking and lockstep training on a lot of things. And then when I made my hard right or left and went into naturopathic medicine, just talking to them, it's like, well, for this condition, congestive heart failure, there's Dr. Balak. He did a 25-year study. He's a cardiac surgeon or cardiologist. And he started following all his patients that had congestive heart failure. And of the ones he lost, he asked for tissue samples from the heart. And what he found is that there was no CoQ10 and very little magnesium. So he started shifting his practice into doing CoQ10, like adding that in. But he was a specialist, and I brought that to my family. It's like, oh, here's what you do. My aunt, Dr. Elsie Tucker, I said, this is what you should do with all your patients. And she's like, nope, I'm afraid to do that, because there was a doctor down in Eugene that was starting to prescribe nutritional supplements to his patients, and they threatened to take his license. So that was the landscape back then, and it has changed so much to today, because I know that now doctors can prescribe vitamin D, a lot of the nutritional supplements without any fear of getting in trouble whatsoever. A lot of them don't know about nutrition, so they don't do that. But the ones that do feel very comfortable doing that. So I think the landscape is changing a lot. And then I think also with the pandemic, that changed a lot of things. There was a lot of things people were afraid to do or say during the pandemic. It was very lockstep. I know my son couldn't go back to college unless he got vaccinated, and then got all the boosters along the way to finish college. And my daughter couldn't enter WSU, without getting vaccinated. Now all of that's changed to a new way of thinking. Everybody's starting to take a pause for a minute, look at vaccine injuries. So I've seen a lot of things change. And I know that when I was going through school, I had to study a lot of the politics of medicine. And there was like a 900-page book on the politics of cancer. And my aunt, she wanted to read part of it, and she was an amazing doctor, and she read about a third of it. She said, this makes me sick to my stomach, because it was a lot of studies, the actual studies, and of things that were still even approved, by the FDA, but it's the actual studies of what happened in the study and the damage that was done with different things like MSG and all of that, the original studies, and on fluoride and things like that. And I know when they first started putting fluoride into the dental industry, and there's dentists that had read some of the studies that didn't want to do it, they were told they had to or they'd lose their license. So I know that a lot of things have shifted, and now dentistry is very open. It's very much a choice. If you don't want to have fluoride treatments, that's fine. If you don't want to drink fluorinated water or use fluoridated toothpaste or anything like that, you don't get any flack at the dental office at all. So I think people are becoming much more open. And then going to the A4M, 4,500 practitioners there 2 years ago. They are so open now since the pandemic to finding other modalities that'll reboot the mitochondria, because that's something that took a huge hit with COVID and the vaccines, because it took down the mitochondria. You have less ATP in the cells, the cell voltage goes down. Cell voltage goes down, people start getting sicker and sicker and sicker with all these other diagnoses. Now their patients, they said before COVID, they might have had 1 or 2, and now they have 10. So how do we manage this? But they were totally lost in the direction to go, and there's so much information out there. I like the trend of seeing the way things are going, and this is one of the first things I noticed and loved about you is you really seem to be educated. I don't know where you're getting all your education, but you seem to be very educated compared to a lot of MDs on alternative things, whether it's stem cells or V cells or PRP or peptides or additional alternative treatments, frequency medicine, light, all of these kind of things you have actually studied into. So I think it's a wonderful opening for integrating these other modalities, the frequency modalities, whatever it is that's regenerative, whether it's peptides or anything else, into traditional medicine. And I'm wondering how you see that big picture view as far as from the traditional medicine side.
Yeah, I think it is going to start with patient or client demand, and it's also going to take the enlightened doctors. So
Yes.
what I have seen the entire time for the doctors, either they get sick themselves or it's a family member. It's someone that's very close to them. It's a child, it's a parent. And that's when they really, really start to look at what conventional medicine has to offer. Oftentimes, when it's that loved one, they will make different choices for the loved one compared to their own patients. And that is oftentimes when maybe the light goes on, or there's a little crack where the open-mindedness starts. I would say that still continues on. What I'm seeing more so now are younger doctors coming out that are just more open-minded. And part of it might be that they already see the limitations of conventional medicine. So let's go back to your example with congestive heart failure. The way that I learned about congestive heart failure was that it was basically a terminal diagnosis. That once the person reached that stage where their heart as a pump just wasn't being efficient anymore, it couldn't pump blood. It was at, let's say, half capacity or even less than that. And the person's quality of life was literally just kind of slowly declining down and down and down. That's what I learned that congestive heart failure was. And I saw it in my own family. Now I know totally different.
Right.
What you had said earlier as far as the CoQ10 and magnesium, and we know about the B vitamins and with certain frequencies. And then there's the possibility of using stem cells in order to help increase your ejection fraction to actually get the pump to work better, regardless of what had happened in the past. And obviously not everything works for everyone, but at least there's different things that you can do now. So the demand, that's really when more and more of us as patients and more of us as doctors start to demand better for ourselves, because we're all in the same boat, right? We're all kind of stuck in this US healthcare system where it's profits over people. And a lot of what we end up talking about is how do you put people as the focus? And so a lot of the frequency-based medicines, that's what it's going to do. It's going to put the people first because these modalities don't cost an arm and a leg. And these are things that we can do several times a week indefinitely in order to help us, which is a very different way of thinking compared to the way things are now, which is you only go to the doctor when you're sick or something's wrong, versus it's more like a gym where you're going to improve upon yourself and to maintain what you have.
So it's healthcare instead of sick care.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, I like the integration of that. You know, I like what you said about doctors having an aha moment. There is a doctor here locally. He's great. But when COVID hit, you know, and he has a big email list. I'm on his email list. He writes a lot of great stuff. And so I like to follow it. And I know when COVID hit, you know, he was really pounding emails on everybody getting vaccinated. And then I read an email from him about a year later. And he kind of wanted to apologize and had done a deep dive into some research because his sister-in-law had been in remission with breast cancer, and she got the vaccination and the spike proteins reactivated the breast cancer. She was dead in 4 months, and she'd been doing really, really well. So he did the research and found out about the spike proteins and reactivating latent disease, and he was very apologetic. But then he started recommending some natural things. Ivermectin almost got himself in big trouble because the traditional medical community didn't want any alternatives. Really interesting to see the evolution, especially when it hits close to home. And one thing I'm hearing a lot from patients that have gotten sick because their immune system's suppressed, their cell voltage is low. And so there's been a lot of cases that I've seen of bronchitis and pneumonia, and people going to the hospital, and the first question they were asked by their doctors, were you vaccinated? And if they were, they don't say anything, right? They just give them rounds of antibiotics. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 to get them through it because they're not responding as quickly. And if they haven't been vaccinated, the doctor said, good, but don't tell anybody I said that, because that still means you have an immune system for us to work with. So I think that the medical community in general is very aware, maybe afraid to say as much, but very aware that we need to be looking into some integrative directions.
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah. There is something, and this doesn't come up very often, but I think it is important to acknowledge two different things. One concept that we haven't really named yet is this concept called the standard of care. And so depending on where you are in the United States and where you are in your state, there can be different standards of care, and the medical board or the medical establishment will hold you to that care. And so what that standard of care is, how you would define it, is what the other doctors in your area, how they're practicing. If you're the one that goes left,
Right.
then you are now not practicing similar to the other doctors. And I'm just going to assume, because of what we're talking about, that we're talking about responsible doctors that want the best for their patients, right? We're not talking about quacks. We're not talking about some cowboys that are trying to hurt their patients. So that is something that a lot of doctors are, for one, they're subject to, but it's also a form of censorship. It can scare doctors into behaving a certain way. With that doctor that kind of had been thinking one way, but then had that experience with his sister and then realized, like, you can't make a blanket statement when it comes to most aspects of medicine that have some kind of risk. With me and vaccinations, back when I was delivering babies, I would explain to especially some of the younger moms, because they would have questions, and I would explain to them, you have all of these different vaccinations. There's some that you're definitely going to want for your baby, and there's some that you can delay, and there's some that you probably aren't going to want for your newborn child or for your child as they get older. That's another aspect that we should talk about, which is the critical thinking. Unfortunately, so much of medical education is heavily, strongly influenced and subsidized by the pharmaceutical industry and the device industry. And so when students are selected for medical school, they have no idea that that's what's going on, right? When I was going through the undergraduate pre-med courses at UCLA, I was just trying to get the best grades that I could. I was trying to learn the most that I could so that I could prove myself, so I could get into medical school. And then when you're in medical school, you're just trying to do your best and move toward what you think you want to be when you grow up. When I looked back, or actually for me, I was in it. I was in the middle of it, and I started thinking about this, and I was like, wait a second, what is going on here? Like, so much of what we're learning, yes, it's about pharmaceuticals, and yes, we're going to be using these, but there's a lot of other aspects of health, medicine, nutrition, supplements, other things that we should be learning about. And so that is something that really, I think, needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be limited to a certain degree in order to make space for young physicians to learn more about other modalities, particularly in these lanes of treatment and prevention and maintenance, rather than always having to rely on this toolkit of just drugs. And, a number of these drugs have side effects. There really should be looking at how do we improve upon the education system rather than just continuing to do what's been done for decades.
I would love to see that integrated into not only continuing medical education, but into medical school training, so that you get a lot more on nutrition, you get a lot more on all these alternate modalities for support. And just to be clear, there's real extremists when it comes to vaccines, and I know that there's some good ones. My kids have had some good ones that were necessary. I'm curious to what you think about, I know the Europeans, they wait until the kids go to school when they're 5 to get their major vaccines, because the immune system's developed enough that they don't need multiple boosters. I mean, I think that sounds like a wonderful theory, because the immune system's just not developed enough when they're born.
I'm all for that. So that's one of the things that we did with our kids. Things are a little bit different. So we went with midwives. I know how to deliver babies, so I actually ended up delivering my son and my youngest daughter.
Awesome.
My youngest daughter was actually born at home, so she and my son was born in a tub in water. There's a story for that for later on, because that was a very unique birth. But there was no way that they were going to get that hepatitis B series before they were. In fact, I don't even remember how long we waited. We may have waited until they needed to go to school for that one.
Yeah. And that's what I would have preferred. I had my kids, I was a single mom. So there is a lot of pressure especially, I mean, you had the advantage of being a traditional medical doctor, so you could very easily stand up for exactly what you wanted to do. It was a little bit harder for me coming from a traditional medical family, being a single mother. I had a lot of pressure to vaccinate early, and I was really careful with some of them. But I wish I had waited, until they went to school, because, with everything I know now, I'd have made better decisions. But not all vaccines are created equal at all. Not all of them are as safe. I mean, some of them are not nearly as tested.
And when you wait, and this is considering that everyone in the family is healthy, you're not having any crazy nails or needles that you have to walk through to get to your house, right? You're not concerned about some of these bloodborne diseases and tetanus like jumping out at you. Right. But waiting until, and especially if the baby can be breastfed, the baby's getting everything that it needs because it's getting directly from the mother, and the mother's this factory that's producing all of these incredible antibodies and delivering it through the milk. I mean, it's such an incredible the way that things actually work. But waiting until the infant becomes a child so that they're older, their immune system has developed and is still developing. And I think it's just a much safer way of delivering something so that you're helping the individual, you're helping the family, and you're extending that, you're helping society. It's unfortunate that a number of the vaccines in use have been combined. Yes. Because when they were singles, like when I was growing up, for one, I didn't have nearly that many, but so many of them were actually singles.
You bet.
That you could spread them out and you could wait for your immune system to adjust, and you could come back in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. One other thought is, and this is one of the things that really saddened me about the pandemic, is part of science is actually fleshing out, bringing out ideas into the open so that you can talk about it. And you can show evidence. What ends up happening when you do that is the ideas that aren't strong enough to survive die, or they get pushed to the side. And by not having debates, by not being forthcoming and transparent with studies and with evidence as the evidence comes out, is a complete injustice to medicine and to the scientific theory and ultimately to society. And this is something that we're going to have to reckon with. And I really do hope that we circle back and we come back to a number of these events that have happened in medicine so that we really have like an honest and open conversation about some of our aspects of medicine.
Oh, for sure. And I think there needs to be an open-mindedness on all sides to really look at the scientific facts. It's just, I've seen a lot happen with the immunization on kids, not with the traditional ones as much, but with the COVID vaccinations. I've seen some really tragic things happen with kids' health, and it breaks my heart. It really does. I know my son had a lot of pressure from school. He went to Audubon University. It's a private school. They excel in two things. They're really good at musical theater, one of the top schools, and at veterinary medicine, two ends of the spectrum.
Okay.
Anyway, they couldn't go back unless they were vaccinated, and then they had to have the routine boosters, right? On a schedule. And he's had 4 boosters, and he's had COVID 4 times. And it was one of those things where, yes, I wanted to get him through school, but it kind of killed me. And I would rather have done a workaround, but he's kind of wanted to go with the flow. So I tried to respect, once you turn 18, I tried to respect him and his wishes. But it's really hard to sit back and see. It seems to have taken a hit on his immune system, and then he gets sick more often, just with regular things that come by. But I've seen, some 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids, it took a horrible turn in their health. And it's hard to come back from that. It's really hard to come back from that. So I think at least this time around, we did kind of an injustice by not doing enough scientific research, kind of rushing ahead with something that wasn't fully tested.
Yeah.
But there are some good ones out there. So it's kind of the middle of the road and the open-mindedness to discuss and look at everything, look at all the facts from both sides.
I feel like that should be the standard for doctors, because you don't want to miss something because of your bias.
Right. And I can say the same thing or naturopaths, people that are into totally alternative medicine that are extremely they're on the other extreme end. It's like we all need to come to the center, look at all the facts, be open-minded, and do what's best for the patient, best for the people.
Yeah, and what that means oftentimes is allowing your client, allowing your patient to help them making a choice. It might not be the choice that you would make as a doctor, but it might be what's best for them where they are. I mean, that's more of like a harm reduction way of thinking. But I mean, a lot of medicine can be considered harm reduction too.
Yeah, I would like to see that. I know there's been some sad cases when kids have had rather minor cancers and the parents were told they would lose their child if they didn't go to chemo.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to look at from both sides. What do you think that educational change should be? Do you think there should be something going into CMEs, or does there have to be a coming of the minds first to be able to get that into continuing medical education on alternatives, not just on vaccines? Let's set vaccines aside.
Yeah, to the side, yeah.
And talk about integration of all these other amazing modalities. I mean, there's a lot out there about red light therapy, and it's being brought into more spaces. You know, once it got FDA approved for wound healing, they actually made red lights on stands that they could use in hospitals to put over a patient for wound healing to decrease the time. So I think more of those things are becoming more mainstream, which is wonderful. I think frequency medicine will be even more mainstream. I still think in the future we're going to be like Star Wars or Star Trek, you know, and have our little device that goes over the wound. Yeah, and heals it. I really think we're going to head that direction. I think that'll be wonderful. I think we're a little ways out from that, but it really requires a change in thinking. I had somebody here that runs the Osler Institute. Just looking at the Osler Institute's curriculum, a lot of it is, I used to go to continuing medical education with my mom and my aunt, and it's very much the same kind of classes that were taught. It hasn't moved into, for their continuing medical education, I think they're 100,000 hours in right now with continuing medical education, but there's nothing in the alternative or regenerative. I shouldn't call it alternative. I should call it regenerative space, because I think the regenerative space is not just everything we do here with all kinds of different frequencies. It is what you do too with all your B cells and stem cells and PRP. I think that's all very much regenerative medicine. And I would love to see that at least being offered as continuing medical education to kind of open people's minds, because they're out there looking. That's what A4M really opened my mind to that. And they need more education to even know what to purchase to put into their clinic. And they want something in their practice.
Yeah, at some point, regenerative medicine will probably be its own specialty. A lot of that probably depends on if doctors can truly be independent and be independent of the hospital chains and the insurance companies. Because one of the things that happens with regenerative medicine is you have a much closer relationship with your doctor, because most of what you're doing is just happening in the doctor's office. So to go back to your question, I think CME is important. CME is continuing medical education, but I think that's actually too late. I feel that CME should be supporting doctors' interests and helping them to shape their practice. One of the things that I ran into kind of early on, but I have to say that I'm the odd man.
Yeah.
In that after UCLA medical school, I went to Chinese medical school. So for me, I immediately had something back to back to compare to. And as I was learning Chinese medicine, I was filling in all of these gaps and all of these questions I had while I was at UCLA. And then a lot of the gaps or things that I needed more clarification on in Chinese medicine, I could rely on from the education from UCLA. So it was this very nice blend. And so I think what really needs to happen is supporting the medical students, supporting their interest, but also selecting students that have an interest in regenerative medicine, who already have a background in using frequency or using light, or have had experiences with Reiki and Qigong and have been interested in healing, but from a different perspective. And now you can bring in a lot of the structural, the molecular components of conventional medicine, and you can combine or marry that with the frequency, the vibration, the light, and give students experiences early on so they can see longitudinally how these modalities help people. Because for me, that was the big thing. Once I started seeing how Chinese medicine, Qigong, the herbal formulas, how these were helping people as they were going through whatever their health challenges were, I couldn't unsee it. I was like, oh,
Right.
This is obviously the best. You take the best from these different modalities. So I would say student selection, making sure there's early exposures. And also the other thing is having a personal experience. So if there were vibrogenics in all of these schools, how incredible would that be? One of the things that we don't do as doctors, physicians, as a lot of healthcare practitioners is we were never taught self-care, which is amazing to me. Like, some people treat their bodies like crap and they treat their minds like crap. When you see some of the foods that you have to eat when you're on call or when you're in the hospital, or back in the day, there were no limits on the amount of time that you work. There's now a limit. Most folks wouldn't know this if you're not in medicine, but there's now a limit of working 80 hours a week when you are a resident. But when I went through the first time, there was no limit. You just worked. And yes, you would get some days off. But you do that for a number of years, and thank God you're young, but that's not helping you stay healthy in any way. I think we really do need to get to a place where everyone is practicing what they preach.
Yeah, I believe that. I think there's going to be, this is just a vision that I hope is true, some elite medical schools that start, they're early adopters, and they start this integration process with teaching about self-care, and many of the other regenerative modalities start them early. Instead of, they'll come out of school and if they get a patient that has a knee injury, instead of going straight to a knee replacement or surgery, they'll look at other alternatives, maybe PRP, maybe stem cells, maybe EMS, vibration, whatever it is. They'll try some other things instead of surgery and drugs being the only options they have. I think there'll be a school or two that comes forward, and maybe the right students go there and it starts making a shift. It has to start somewhere.
We have to figure this out, because we can see that as our nation becomes sicker, we're not only getting sicker, our lifespan went negative.
Yes.
Instead of our lifespan increasing, it actually dropped, and we're spending more money than ever on healthcare. Like, this is not sustainable in any way.
Yeah, it's one of the most expensive healthcare systems in the world, and we're one of the most unhealthy nations. And you would think with all the medical advancements that we'd have, there would be greater longevity, there would be better health, and it's not going in that direction. So there's got to be a way to fix the system. So there's got to be some early adopters or something out there that's going to change the space. And maybe it's both. Maybe it's some early adopters as far as medical schools and starting to bring in the right students and teach integrative technologies. And maybe there will be continuing medical education and we'll start changing the game. Something's got to change the landscape.
As I go out and I'm meeting more doctors, there's other doctors like myself who have been pursuing this. Now I think it's going to be easier for us to meet each other, because sometimes I go to conferences and I'm like, this is my tribe. Yes, finally I'm surrounded by people that I can actually have a conversation with. But it can feel lonely at times if out of 1,000 doctors, you're the one doctor who has been pursuing frequencies and energies and regeneration and seeking out, how do you utilize stem cells and how do you integrate frequency with other modalities that you're doing.
We have to get you to present at the A4M, because a lot of doctors have that very same question. They just need to know the how and the what to get and how to use it, how to integrate everything together. Because I think there's a lot out there that really want to do better for their patients. They just don't have any other tools.
Yes.
But we're really in that whole different phase. I think I've mentioned before that 2023 integrative medical centers, wellness centers were the #1 fastest growing business. And I really see this eventually becoming a branch or a part of a hospital where people can get these regenerative services, whether it's the injections, stem cells, all of that stuff that you do, or integrated with the red light and frequencies and all of that. They can get the regenerative part of it. I mean, I've even heard about hospitals that are looking into this, adding that on, because it's what people are looking for. They're looking for something else because everything they're doing is not working. Even a lot of the people we have here at Regenix that are clients here, they've exhausted the medical system and they're still in the medical system heavily. A lot of them are on a lot of medications. They're just desperate to feel better. So they come here. It's hard to get them to stop or slow down on any of the other stuff. I saw something on wellness. It was interesting. It was on Facebook and it made me think a lot, because it was to the point that wellness a lot of times is letting go and releasing bad habits,
Mm.
things that are really holding us down. Somebody may cry for help when they're in a river and they're drowning, but they don't want to let go of the stone, whatever that is that's pulling them down. Because I do know this from being in practice. It's like I got to the point where one of the first questions I would ask is, do you want to be healthy? Do you want to be well?
Yeah.
And if I get a long pause, I would ask or tell them that their next assignment is to make 2 lists. One list is going to be what my life would look like if I was completely healthy and thriving again. The second list was, how is my illness benefiting me now? And I had 2 stage 4 breast cancer patients that came in and saw me on the same day. And one of them was instant. Yes, I want to be well. And, she was just all about it. 100%. And the other one was, yeah, I don't know. And she came back and saw me with her list. And her list was, if I'm healthy and well, I have to go back to work, start cleaning, I have to start cooking again, taking care of my family. And the other side was, I get to do anything I want, have a housekeeper. It benefited her. So she didn't go forward with looking for any alternative treatment or anything to help her. She just kind of quit the whole thing. She lived another 12 years. So it's interesting. Sometimes even that boulder that you're holding on to that's sinking you is how your illness is serving you in the first place. And for other people, it's a toxic relationship, or it's alcohol, or it's sugar, or whatever they're doing that they're kind of doing way too much of in their life that's bringing their health down. And sometimes your health will buoy back up. It's not just a pill or a regenerative solution that you need. It's to change something that you're doing in your daily life and let go.
Yep, that's the good medicine there. That's when you're really being a good doctor. The problem for conventional medicine is its reliance on the pills and the surgery and the devices rather than what you just described, which is that human-to-human interaction and really having a heart-to-heart talk with someone in order to allow them to really figure out, well, if you get a lot of gain from this illness, then we don't really need to be working together.
Right. There's nothing I can do to make you better. But it's, on the patient side or the client side is we come from the same mentality as traditional medicine. People are raised with that. If there is something wrong with you, you go get a pill. That's what's going to fix it. You don't have to fix anything in you or anything about your daily life.
You go outside.
You need to go to a doctor and get medicine or surgery or whatever else it is.
Yeah, it's the fix me mentality. I feel as if conventional medicine needs to make those 2 lists that you just described. Because conventional medicine is hanging on to something that is larger than a boulder that is definitely making it drown now. And I don't know if conventional medicine is willing to let go of it.
That's very insightful. It makes me think back a number of years ago. And someone gave me this article, and it was on an anonymous survey done with oncologists where they asked if you or your family got cancer, would you take chemotherapy as a treatment? And 94% of them said no. And I was astounded at that. I was astounded. I mean, they would seek other therapies, probably within traditional medicine, whether it's surgery or kind of radiation or whatever it was, but it would not do chemo. And I thought, this is insane, because that's the first thing that is ordered when you have cancer.
Yep. And cancer is one of the money makers for conventional medicine. Like when you see a number of hospitals and when they're building something, or when you look at what's the biggest, shiniest aspect of the hospital, it's oftentimes going to be the cancer center named after whoever donated the most money. One other thing, and I don't know if we had talked about this before, but when I learned this concept in Chinese medicine, it just made so much sense to me, which is when you go back in time, Chinese medicine, we're calling it Chinese medicine for them. It was just medicine. People paid while they were healthy. They didn't pay when they were sick. And because this aspect of prevention, you were following what the doctor said, if the way your diet was, if it's nice and balanced, you're working hard, but you're making sure that you're sleeping. If a doctor was seeing certain things that was going out of balance or out of harmony, they would tell you, hey, you need to lay off some of that wine. You should walk more, or you got to be really careful being in that cold environment for such a long time because it's going to injure your kidneys. So you're taking advice from your doctor as far as lifestyle, as far as things that you should be doing. And as long as you were doing that, more than likely you stayed healthy. But when you became ill, that's when you needed the doctor, but you weren't paying the doctor at that point.
I love that. I wish we had that here.
So it's a completely different way of thinking about our health. healthcare as an individual, but also as a society. There are some major shifts that we're going to need in this country. And I think it's possible because we have a lot of people who are very active, who see their activities as not only part of their physical health, but part of their mental health.
Oh,
and
sure.
I mean, I see a lot of folks that are like that because they're older athletes and they're very motivated. And so I think there is hope as far as us being able to help push our system in the right direction and to be educating folks in order for them to be healthier. One of my visions for Vibrogenics is to have these, if you want to call it a clinic or a healing home, but to have these modalities in areas so that people can go 2, 3, 4 times a week on a regular basis, just like they were going to the gym. But every time they're going, they're adding a little drop of health to their cup. And eventually that cup is going to be full of health and they're going to be feeling great. They're going to be looking great. They're going to be moving well. And they're going to have that vital life and quality of life that they really want.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's definitely something to move in the direction of getting more health centers set up for regenerative medicine and integrating, having people like you that's a part of that can help them with other things as well, not just going to a wellness spa, but having medical oversight if they need it to push them in a little bit different direction and help with different things that are outside of that scope. I think setting these up is one powerful thing we can do. I think another powerful thing is conversations like this that we get out on podcasts so people can see the bigger picture, because I think everybody knows the system is, I think that's straight across the board. But everybody points fingers at the other people, right? The traditional medicine's broken, the alternative medicine's broken. The people are also broken because they still have that mentality of just fix me, right? I don't want to change anything. I don't want to exercise more. I don't want to change my diet. And I just want to be fixed. So I think we all have to take responsibility for whatever we need to change, because I think my side of natural medicine, I'm much more in the middle because of how I was raised and what I was exposed to than a lot of people in my line of work. They are so far out here, and there's a lot of negative talk about traditional medicine and back and forth. So I think these conversations are really important in getting it to the point where we have a lot more homes, a lot more centers. I think it's going to be powerful, and having access to people like you and access to people like me.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think there are so many more doctors out there who want to join us. They just don't know how.
Exactly. And that's one big takeaway I got from the A4M is everybody wants this, and they don't know the how, and they don't know enough about it to make an educated decision. Even doctors that we've sold 3, 4, 5 pieces of equipment to that know this is important, it is like starting at the beginning of the education with them. You are like way down the road because you're a Chinese medical doctor as well. So you're way down the road in the understanding of that aspect of medicine. They are at the beginning, and that's almost the course material that needs to be provided to build that foundation. But I think there's a lot more people that are open, and I think the silver lining again of the pandemic is a lot of people are a lot more open and a lot more willing to speak up and to listen, open their mind.
Yeah, that's what's important.
This has been amazing.
It was a good conversation.
It was a great conversation. It just kind of took off and rolled. Thank you so much for your time, and I can't wait till next time.
All right, good to see you again. Thank you.
You too.